What would you do if the man who left you at the altar resurfaced 3 years later under a fake name, with a new life, and about to marry the daughter of a powerful senator? Would you cry? Would you walk away? Or would you crash his wedding with the police? 3 years ago, I was left in a white dress and shattered silence. No calls, no apologies. The man I loved, Damon Walsh, vanished hours before our vows, erasing every promise we ever made. Everyone said, "Move on." I said nothing, but I never stopped looking. And then I found him, living under a different identity, engaged again, this time to Isabel Morgan, the perfect heiress from a family with more power than conscience. The wedding, a glittering spectacle in Charleston, the guest list, senators, CEOs, media. The truth? Rotten. Because Damon wasn't just a runaway groom. He was a con man, a thief, and the reason my brother went to prison for a crime he didn't commit. They say revenge is a dish, best served cold. Mine came with a guest pass, a wire, and a plan that involved federal agents and the bridal march. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about justice. It's a story about a woman who stopped waiting for closure and took it. So if you've ever wondered what it feels like to walk into a wedding not to catch a bouquet, but to destroy a lie, if you've ever been ghosted, used, betrayed, if you've ever dreamed of a moment where you could finally say, "I know who you are," and everyone else is about to know too, then don't miss this story, because I didn't just crash his wedding, I burned his second life to the ground. Stay with me. Let me tell you how I did it. Before the betrayal, before the silence, before I found myself crashing a wedding in high heels and a bulletproof plan, I was happy. At least I thought I was. I was an assistant district attorney in Charleston, known for being sharp, unshakable, and occasionally a bit too stubborn for my own good. My mornings began with coffee from the same cafe on King Street, the barista already knowing to write S on the cup with a smiley face. My days were packed with case files, depositions, and courtrooms that smelled faintly of ink and nerves. And my nights? They belonged to Damon Walsh. He was everything I wasn't: relaxed, spontaneous, good with people. Damon could charm a whole dinner party without breaking a sweat, and I'd watch him from across the room, wondering how someone like that had ended up with someone like me. But he always found me in the crowd, always reached for my hand under the table, always kissed my forehead like it meant something. Back then, it did. We met during a trial involving a construction scam. He was an advisor on the tech used to falsify bidding data. I was the lead prosecutor. We clashed, argued, flirted, and a month later, we were inseparable. For 5 years, we built a life that looked perfect on paper: a loft downtown, vacations in Asheville and the Keys, Sunday mornings tangled in sheets and takeout boxes. He told me he wanted to grow old with me. He said, "There's no one else I'd rather fight with at 70. I remember laughing. I believed him. And when he proposed on a rainy night in October with a simple gold band and shaking hands, I didn't hesitate. We sent out the invitations a week later. Everything fell into place. Until it didn't. The day of our wedding, I woke up early. Too early. My mother paced around the suite in a pale blue dress, nervously straightening flower arrangements. My bridesmaids sipped mimosas and offered to touch up my lipstick every 10 minutes. I stared out the window at the storm clouds gathering over the estate, thinking, this is too quiet. And then it came. A call from Damon's best man. He's not here. What do you mean? He never showed. His phone's off. What followed was a blur of confusion, panic, denial. My father went searching. My maid of honor cried harder than I did. I sat down, still in my wedding gown, staring at the phone in my hand like it owed me an explanation. No note, no text, just gone. That night, I ripped the dress down the back and left it in the hotel closet. I booked a room on the other side of town and didn't tell anyone where I went. My phone rang dozens of times. Friends, family, reporters. I answered none. The police launched a missing persons report. His apartment? cleaned out his office, said he'd quit the week before. His accounts? Frozen or transferred. Just like that, he had vanished. They told me he might have had cold feet, but cold feet don't erase 5 years of memories. What they didn't know was that this wasn't Damon's first disappearing act. My brother, Evan, had warned me once. There's something off about him, Sienna. He always knows too much about everything, but says too little about himself. I brushed it off, called it jealousy. But Evan had reasons to hate Damon. 2 years before the wedding, Evan had been arrested for insider trading. The tip had come from a whistleblower, anonymous. Evan swore the trades weren't his, said he'd been set up. I believed the system more than I believed my brother. That was my second mistake. After Damon vanished, I took leave from the DA's office. I told my supervisor I was burned out. In truth, I was unraveling. I spent months combing through Damon's past, calling old contacts, checking property registries, anything that could explain what had happened. I found nothing, so I stopped looking. I told myself I had to move on. I moved into a smaller place, joined a private investigation firm, and threw myself into work. Cheating husbands, corporate theft, missing persons. I told myself each case was just a paycheck. But every time I caught a liar, a thief, or a coward, I thought of him. And then, nearly 3 years later, I saw his face again. A photo, a headline, a lie wrapped in tuxedo linen and silk ties. Elliot Gray, Charleston's new real estate powerhouse, to wed Isabel Morgan. He was there, smiling, standing next to the daughter of a senator. The man who ruined my life was about to ruin someone else's, and I wasn't going to let that happen. You'd think I'd scream when I saw that headline, but I didn't. I stared at the screen like it wasn't real. The man standing in the glossy engagement photo looked like Damon Walsh. Mannerisms, smile, eyes that could talk circles around you. But the name beneath him wasn't Damon Walsh. It was Elliot Gray. The same man who had left me in a white dress in silence 3 years ago was now Charleston's rising real estate mogul. His fiancée? Isabel Morgan, the only daughter of Senator Thomas Morgan, a woman with a curated image and a suspiciously quiet past. This wasn't a love story. This was politics. And he wasn't missing. He was rebranded. I leaned back in my office chair, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd crack a rib. The air was thick with old perfume and the sound of my own breathing. Outside, traffic buzzed as if the universe wasn't being flipped upside down. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had buried me under a new identity. I opened a new tab and typed, Elliot Gray Charleston. In seconds, I was staring at press releases, fundraisers, real estate transactions. A new company registered under his name, Gray Properties, LLC, with seed capital of $2.5 million from an anonymous investor. Anonymous, my ass. The deeper I searched, the more familiar patterns emerged. New name, new signature, but the same charm, the same calculated image, the same man who once whispered in my ear that he could build a new life out of ashes. And he did, out of the ashes of mine. For 2 nights I barely slept. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling fan, remembering every moment we'd spent together. The way he held my hand in courtrooms, the way he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear like he was writing a lie into my skin. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was furious. But fury without a plan is just noise. And I'd learned how to make mine cut. So I made a list. I needed absolute proof Elliot Gray was Damon Walsh. Something legal, solid, admissible. Not just to confront him, but to bury him if needed. Using old files, I matched signature patterns between Damon's employment contracts and Elliot's business deals. Same loops, same spacing. Then came the real break. A utility bill registered to Gray's first property had a forwarding address tied to an apartment Damon once used under a pseudonym. J. Maddox. He used my name. Why disappear? Why become someone else? I dug into the finances. Damon had once been named in a quiet federal inquiry into real estate fraud, but no charges were ever filed. Turns out he took the fall for someone higher up and got a payout to vanish. His price? $1 million and a clean slate. The same $1 million I found missing from my joint account 3 years ago. He didn't just leave me, he robbed me. If I confronted him now, it would be my word against his, and his tuxedo held more power than my courtroom heels. No, I needed leverage. Something bigger than heartbreak, something criminal. Then I remembered something Damon once said in passing. One of those things you think means nothing until it becomes everything. Everyone's got a skeleton. You just have to know where the closet is. I decided to find his. First, I got a burner phone and created an anonymous tip line. I posed as a whistleblower, sent fragments of what I had to a local investigative journalist I trusted. The pieces began to stir. Meanwhile, I contacted an old friend in the police department, Detective Marshall Reyes, who owed me a favor after I helped his cousin beat a wrongful conviction. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to plant the seed. "Marshall, do you believe people can fake their way into new lives?" He laughed. "In this city? Hell yeah. All you need is money and the right handshake." I smiled. What if someone faked their way into a senator's family? His laughter stopped. The wedding was scheduled to take place at the historic Caraway estate, complete with security, media, and a guest list that read like a Forbes gala. I wasn't invited, of course, but I'd be there. Not in a white dress this time, not in tears, not with a broken heart. I'd be there in heels, holding a folder thicker than his lies, with a badge next to me and a storm in my eyes. As the date approached, the air in Charleston seemed to change. I could feel it in my bones. The city was about to witness something real, something raw. I wasn't the abandoned bride anymore. I was the reckoning. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted one that whispered, slowly, methodically, until it sank beneath his skin and rotted him from the inside out. That kind of revenge takes planning, timing, discipline. So I started with the foundation, his lies. It wasn't hard to dig. Once I had confirmed Elliot Gray was Damon Walsh, the rest unfolded like a rotting carpet. His company, Gray Properties, was more illusion than empire. Many of the properties listed on his website were photo-staged shells. No permits, no real transactions. He was flipping empty lots with inflated paperwork, backed by investors that didn't exist outside burner LLCs. Fraud. Classic Damon. All glitter. No gold. But this time, I wasn't just the ex. I was the scalpel. I got in touch with Valerie Kim, a real estate attorney I once worked with on a pro bono housing case. She hated corporate fraud as much as I did, and she had access to databases even Damon wouldn't dream of. "What's in it for me?" she asked, always blunt. "Front row seat to watching a ghost get handcuffed at his own wedding," I said. She grinned. "Send me what you've got." In 2 days, she uncovered enough to trigger a full audit request. Some of the investors Damon listed were dead. Others were convicted felons barred from financing real estate deals. The red flags were multiplying. But it wasn't enough. I needed something criminally undeniable. That's when Valerie flagged a property deal that felt wrong. A lot on East Marlin Street had been purchased under Gray Properties, but the signature on the deed wasn't Damon's. It was mine. Forged. He had used my name on a fraudulent transfer to cover a money trail. If anyone ever looked too closely, I would be liable. And suddenly, it wasn't just revenge. It was survival. I printed every document, labeled every folder. I recorded timestamps. I built a case worthy of court and the court of public opinion. But I didn't stop there. I began shadowing Isabel, not stalking, just observing. Her schedule was predictable. Yoga at 6, brunch at 9, gallery meetings in the afternoon. Perfect little routine. But one thing stood out. A small cafe she visited every Thursday, always alone. She'd sit by the window, phone untouched, sipping matcha like she was waiting for the world to impress her. So I introduced myself. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but curiosity. Sienna Maddox, right? You were a defense attorney downtown. I nodded. And you're marrying Elliot Gray. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. So I've been told. We talked. Cautiously at first, then more freely. Turns out Isabel wasn't as naive as I'd assumed. She knew Elliot had secrets, but her father, the senator, liked Elliot's ambition. And in their world, ambition forgives everything. I asked her one question before I left. What if ambition turns criminal? She blinked. Then I suppose he'll have to pay for it. I sent a tip to the Financial Crimes Division, anonymously. A full packet was delivered to the Department of Licensing and Regulation. Valerie prepared an affidavit to accompany the evidence, should things escalate. And then came the pièce de résistance. I went back to Detective Reyes. This time, I gave him everything. I don't want a raid, I said. I want a statement. He read the file in silence, eyes narrowing, mouth tightening. This is federal, he muttered. You realize what happens if this goes public before they're ready? Then make it quiet, but be there, at the wedding. You'll know when. He nodded. You better be sure. I'm not just sure, I said. I'm done letting him write the story. The Caraway estate glistened like a dream. Champagne flowed, strings played, reporters gathered. It looked like a fairy tale. But fairy tales aren't built on stolen names. I arrived in a charcoal silk dress, folder in hand, my heels clicking like clockwork against the marble floor. Damon, Elliot, stood at the altar, smiling like a man who had outrun the past, until he saw me. His jaw clenched, his eyes flicked to the side, scanning for exits. Too late. I stepped forward. Guests turned, gasps, cameras, and then a hand on his shoulder. Detective Reyes, badge out. Elliot Gray, a.k.a. Damon Walsh, you're under arrest for real estate fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The music stopped. The bride froze. And me? I smiled. You know what no one tells you about revenge? It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence. Dense. Absolute. Just before everything breaks. The wedding hall stood frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady ticking of the chandelier above the altar. Damon, no, Elliot, turned to Reyes, fury contorting his face. This is a mistake. I don't know what she's told you. Reyes held up the warrant. Your real name is Damon Walsh. You used a fake identity to build Gray properties, forged documents under a stolen signature. That's a lie. Reyes didn't flinch. And yet, here we are, in front of over 100 witnesses, on the day you were supposed to become someone else again. Isabel stood stone still, bouquet clutched in both hands. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I didn't see a bride. I saw a woman watching the illusion crack like glass beneath her heels. I expected her to scream. She didn't. Instead, she walked forward and slapped him, loud and clean across the cheek. The flowers dropped. Her voice was steel. You lied to me, to my father, to everyone. Do you even know who you are anymore? The guests were murmuring now, phones out, cameras clicking. The fairy tale was bleeding into chaos. Damon turned to me, eyes burning, lips curled. You did this. I didn't blink. You did this. I just gave it a stage. The press exploded the next morning. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Fraud, identity theft, financial crimes across state lines. What I did do was give Valerie full control of the evidence and made sure the right hands got it. Elliot, Damon, was denied bail. But the story wasn't done. Not for me. A week later, I met Isabel at the same cafe. She was in a hoodie, no makeup, staring into a cup of cold matcha. When she saw me, she didn't sneer. She didn't cry. She just said, "How long did you know?" Long enough to know he didn't deserve either of us. Silence. Then, he said he loved me. He said that to me too. right before he forged my name to commit a felony. That got a small laugh, hollow but real. She sipped her drink. He used me. He uses everyone, but now he's done. She looked at me then, really looked. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Another pause. Thank you, she said. I nodded. You deserve the truth. And we left it at that. As for Damon, his empire crumbled overnight. The media dug up every scrap of his history, old court filings, student loans under false names, shady deals from years past. His face was everywhere, newspapers, talk shows, podcasts. They called him the Phantom Investor. I called him finished. His sentencing took months, but the outcome was inevitable. 5 years minimum, possibly more. He didn't try to contact me. Not once. Maybe he finally realized I was the one opponent he couldn't charm, couldn't outplay, and couldn't bury. I moved apartments, started teaching part-time at a local law school. There's something cathartic about standing in front of a classroom, telling students how to not fall for loopholes, deception, and charm dressed in ambition. Some days I still wake up angry. Some nights I hear his voice in my dreams. But most days, I feel clean. And if you're wondering if I regret crashing his wedding, let me ask you this. If someone sets your whole life on fire, wouldn't you show up to watch them burn? Because I did, and I didn't blink. There's a strange silence that follows the storm, after the headlines fade, after the court gavel hits the wood, after the prison doors close behind the man who once promised you forever. What's left? A new morning. A quiet apartment with too much space and not enough noise. A toothbrush holder with only one toothbrush now. And a woman standing in front of the mirror trying to recognize herself again. That woman was me. After the trial, I spent weeks trying to figure out what to feel. Relief? Definitely. Victory? Maybe. But mostly, grief. Not for Damon, but for the version of me who believed him, who stayed, who smiled through warning signs and red flags, who handed over her heart like a naive girl in a fairy tale, and only later realized she'd signed a contract with a villain. I didn't cry after the sentencing. I didn't cry when they took him away in cuffs. But I cried the night I found our old anniversary card stuffed in a drawer, his handwriting messy and stupidly romantic, promising he'd never leave. He left. Over and over, in ways I hadn't even understood until it was too late. But healing, I've learned, is not linear. Some days I woke up and took the world by the throat. Other days I hid under the covers, replaying every word he ever said, wondering if it was all a lie, or if maybe, somewhere in between the manipulation and fraud, he meant some of it. Maybe that's the hardest part, not the betrayal, but the doubt. I remember walking into the kitchen one morning and realizing I hadn't thought of him in 3 days. It stopped me cold. That was the moment I knew I was finally moving on. Not because I'd found someone else. I hadn't. Not because I'd forgiven him. I hadn't and probably never will. But because I no longer needed to hate him to feel whole. Valerie said I should write a book about it. You've got the perfect arc, she told me. Betrayal, revenge, justice, it's gold. I told her maybe someday, when the scars itch less. For now, I keep it quiet, private. Except for this story, my voice, my truth. And maybe that's enough. As for Isabel, she vanished from the press within weeks. Her family pulled every string to get her out of the spotlight. Last I heard, she moved to the coast, started a nonprofit, rebuilt. I don't hate her. She was collateral, just like me. We were both sold a lie. We both wore the same blindfold. She just wore it with pearls. Sometimes people ask me what I'd say to Damon if I saw him again. I used to imagine dramatic speeches, tears, shouting, truth bombs. Now, I think I'd say nothing. I think I'd just walk past him, steady and silent. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I'm finally there. You see, People think revenge is about getting even, but it's not. It's about reclaiming your voice in a story that someone else tried to write for you. It's about standing in the rubble of what they destroyed and choosing to build something better, brick by honest brick. It's about surviving and then thriving. I crashed his wedding with the police, but I saved myself with the truth. And if you're listening to this and you've ever felt broken, betrayed, like the world tilted under your feet and no one saw you fall, you're not alone. You're not weak. You're not to blame. You're just one chapter away from your own redemption arc. And I promise it's worth writing. If there's one thing I've learned from everything that happened, it's this. You can survive the worst day of your life, even when it's public, even when it's humiliating, even when the person who promised to protect your heart is the one who set it on fire. You can still rise from it. When I walked into that wedding with the police behind me, I wasn't just exposing a liar. I was reclaiming every moment I'd been silenced, manipulated, made to feel small. I wasn't the broken woman he left behind. I was the storm he never saw coming. But this story isn't just mine. It belongs to every woman who stayed too long, every person who questioned their worth, every voice that was once quieted by someone else's power. I want you to know this. The moment you decide you're done settling, done hiding, done swallowing the pain in silence, that's the moment your story begins to change. You don't need a courtroom. You don't need a scandal. You just need your truth and the courage to speak it. Because the most powerful revenge isn't public humiliation. It's peace. It's freedom. It's waking up one day and realizing you're finally free. And if this story gave you chills, made you angry, made you feel seen, then maybe it was meant for you. Stay strong, stay sharp, and never let someone write your ending for you.